we are going to talk about the data continuum. We have been witnessing the proliferation of the kind of the data that has been getting generated and the associated regulatory framework. In the context of these two, we have been hearing the term called digital economy and the data economy. Now, how best the data economy will be leveraged for the years and for the generations to come will be dependent on how effectively and how productively the technology is going to get utilized and within the regulatory aspects and then compliance aspects. So in that context, I will start with some of the questions that we will try to find answer through our esteemed panelists. So give me a second. So my first question is to, my first question is to Mr. Rajan Tawate. Now, we have seen in terms of the digital payments, the kind of growth on the digital payment transactions, right? It has been at a CAGR of more than 73%, and over the next 2 to 3 years' time, kind of jumping by leap and bound. Now, in this context, how do you see the sweet spot for some of the traditional players as well as fintech players to be able to do innovation and then kind of add value to the financial ecosystem?
Thanks for having me on the call. And as you rightly pointed out, post the COVID era, the digital payments have jumped in by leaps and bounds. So that has actually led to a lot of data history about common person payments, right? And that is something we can use to unlock digital payment scores or credit for people who are new to credit. To give an example, let's say there are farmers or there are housewife and they want to go for a Kisan credit card or for E-Mudra Yojana, right? So their data can be accessed from alternative credit scores, let's say from the electricity bill payments or payments made on e-commerce sites. So using those data stores, people can actually create digital payment scores, and that can be used by banks to do lending underwriting decisions. That is something which is coming up in the current era. Yeah, okay. Sure.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Rajan. So my next question goes to Abhijeet. So Abhijeet, we have been witnessing India's economy continuing to get digitized at such a rapid pace. That has also translated into the scale and complexity of the data. Now, within the financial sector, what kind of data infrastructure and data management do you believe are necessary for these institutions to effectively handle this kind of surge? And how can these investments then be aligned to countries' unique digital landscape as well as the regulatory environment?
Yes, long question. First of all, honored to be here. Last year, I have a lot of respect the way the banking frontier had been run. Last year, I couldn't attend. I'm happy this year they invited me and I couldn't attend. Now coming back to the question you had, there are two parts. One is the infrastructure and how the new technology stack of India, how it is impacting. Now this is the problem is facing all the CIOs in the BFSI sector are facing this scalability problem, especially after introduction of UPI and other voluminous transaction level is happening. This is even, we are doing a transaction for even 10 rupees, 5 rupees. So this kind of volume is unseen in Indian banking scenario. It has probably seen in other sectors of the industry like e-commerce and so on and so forth, but in banking, this was not heard of. Obviously, from the perspective of the data, this kind of degradation has created the volume of data, whatever you have. And it is quite established now that data is going to give you the edge over the, it's a now core business model. It's not only data as a data ionic part. Look, in terms of managing scalability, the easy answer for me is more is less. You put more machine, you get more computing power, and you can, grow it out. But there is a cost angle to it. I think the ideal answer is you need to look into your business models in order to decide how you're going to structure your data architecture. To give an example, for e-commerce, a recommendation engine is the most critical item because that needs a real-time data processing. But where in case of banking, it's very different. The real-time processing may require the fraud or the online fraud checks and so. Whether the bank's team do a lot of forensic data or not, whether real-time streaming is required or not. If you, again, for a banking, real-time streaming except fraud, there is hardly any other use cases. So you need to pick and choose which portion of the technology you need to use to satisfy your business requirement. If you want to do a lot of forensic, go for a lot of service and server intensive technologies. Purely from the infrastructure side, if you look, storage is the cheapest part. In order to add storage, you really don't have to think much. But how are you going to process the data? How are you going to make the data distributed in order to get the details out? So that is what the challenge is. The last 2 points over here is what we have seen nowadays in last 5 years. There is a huge surge in data engineering, which is obviously the start data warehouse and everything people started adopting 15, 20 years back. What last 5 years back people started adopting more mass is data analytics. But what is happening now with the data analytics and AI ML coming into the force, people have started looking into the quality of the data. Because if the quality of the data is wrong, then your analytics will not work, your AI ML models will not work. So there are a lot of emphasis for investment required for the governance part, how to cure the data, how to ensure the data, what I'm putting in the model is right. I think the investment need to happen there because that will going to probably give you a better edge and so on and so forth. And last and not the least is the resources. People still have the SQL hangover if you go to the market. So you have to find out resources who understand the new way of working on the data and how to utilize it. One last point on the India stack, what we have seen. So what we are seeing, at least in our bank and other industry, what banks not used to do it earlier, what is doing now, they are doing a lot of behavioral analysis, which was not happening. Previously, it was mainly reporting or a certain kind of select queries. But the behavioral analysis, looking into a payment pattern, understand what's your next purchase will be or a next, whether you have a loan requirement or not. That had added up a new string on the overall scheme of things.
Thanks, Abhijeet. I know the question was long. So my next question is to Aditya Kulkarni. The life insurance industry has always been at the forefront of using technology. Now, given the buzzword and the kind of work happening around Gen AI, when do you think will the real use case of Gen AI in the life insurance industry will start getting incorporated? And what kind of use cases do you think will facilitate this?
Sure, I think that is one of the favorite questions that we usually see now. Gen AI as one of the key ways in which technology is also changing. And let me put it this way, that Gen AI presently is giving us that opportunity to actually reimagine and rethink the processes that we had been developing till now. So what it tries to do is, with the way in which it works, it will provide you as a shunt engine to actually do away with processes which were earlier there from the technology bit, and reimagine and redesign these processes to give a better output that is expected. So in the insurance industry, we know that penetration of insurance to that extent is very low in India. What Gen AI use cases, and these are the use cases that we are presently also implementing in our organizations. We have started small with respect to comparisons of different documents that are existing in our ecosystems. And we have done this across the value chain of the customer, which means at the onboarding stage, at the underwriting stage, at issuance stage, servicing stage, and as well as the moment of truth, which is essentially the claims processing. What we are doing at present with these touch points is, can we give our servicing agents, when we talk about the servicing use case, can we give them a way in which a chatbot becomes so intelligent that when they are asking a real-time question to the chatbot, the answers are given in a more contextual way. And that essentially helps the quality of conversations between the customers and the servicing agents that we presently are having. At the same time, what is also being looked at is, and rightly said so, that the behavioral analytics is something that people are also looking at. And this is a use case that we are also toying around with right now, is during the time of underwriting, if there is a discussion that is going on between the customer and our executive, our sales executive, and if there are questions with respect to your health, your financial underwriting, all of those in place, how is the customer answering those questions? What kind of twitching is he doing? Whether he is confident in answering those questions? And this is a categorical answer which we are trying to derive from the video and audio bits that we usually capture, and giving it as a feed to our LLM models and getting the output in terms of saying that whether the person is actually faking it or is it a genuine discussion that is happening. So the frontiers are quite broadened now, wherein this kind of a discussion usually would be done with a, I would say, a person who is more inclined towards reading the psychology of a human. And this is what we are also trying to feed our LLM models at this point in time. From a use case perspective, as I mentioned, we are also trying to look at whether an LLM is the one that will give you the answer, which is a large language model, or whether we should be also looking at an SLM. The small language models will also do your bit when you try to do an edge computing, if we have to look at it. Because after a given point in time, once we are through with toying around with the use cases, ROI will come knocking our door, because as we know, these LLMs typically are the ones which are not inexpensive. These are the tokens that get generated out of LLMs, to and fro of these tokens. Typically, the costing for this is quite high at this point in time. And the war that we are seeing with respect to the biggies of the generation, there are open source models which are also coming up big time, which will also help in terms of reducing the overall costs that we see that GenAI is generating at this point in time. So yeah, I think there are a lot of good things that will come up through GenAI, and we all are hooked to understanding how these things will also change. One last bit before probably wrapping up the answer for the question is, why do we see that GenAI is taking up a bigger mind share of people? And that is because it is giving you that instant gratification. So you put a question to it and it gives you the answer. Typically, when we are trying to compare these technologies of GenAI versus blockchain, what blockchain would mean is a trust-based ecosystem. And when you want a lot of people to come onto one ecosystem, which is a trust-based, that is the most difficult thing that usually comes up when we want a lot of people to actually be in one ecosystem. Whereas GenAI gives you that instant gratification, whereas individual is getting the answer, and it is an answer which is till now that he has not got such kind of contextual answers. So I think that is how GenAI is speeding up.
Okay. So thanks Aditya. I will take the extension of this question to Satish Dhupdale. In the context of micro and meso financing, now, how do you see this large language model versus small language model kind of interplay happening, and what kind of debate has been going around as to which kind of model will be more relevant and more persistent?
They are evolving extremely rapidly, and this Gen AI and AI in general is one of those things which is like the more you use it, the stronger it gets. It's like going to the gym, right? You use your biceps more, you become stronger on your biceps. Right? When you go to a private LLM, you will typically find that you are training it on a smaller data set, which is probably customized to what you're doing. But the smaller the data set is, it's going to get used much less, it's going to get less data, and it's going to evolve slowly. Right? And if I step back, The reason I want to use a private LLM or a small language model as opposed to a public LLM is there is a lot of enterprise context to my use case, right? Like Abhijeet was saying, when I am replying to a customer, right? When I have an agent or a chatbot that's replying to a customer in an insurance vertical and specific to their company, the way they want the answer to go out is going to be very different than what we as a lender want to interact with our customer, right? So at level 1, I would want a natural language model which understands what the customer is trying to say. But the reply is going to be very contextualized to what the customer's interactions with me have been, what my enterprise's experience in responding to customers of this kind have been, and eventually what's my objective. It's a grievance call, it's a sales call, and the way I respond to it very depends a lot on my organizational context. The second part of this is the regulation. If I'm in an e-commerce industry, I am very lightly regulated. But when I'm in a financial services industry, I am regulated very strongly. And the way I have to safeguard my customers' data is very different. Right? The regulatory burden on me is on me as a regulated entity is very high. So when I put all of these in context, there will obviously be cases where I want to use public LLMs, and there will be places where I want to use a private LLM. In the context of micro and meso financing, when I look at it, right, a lot of micro meso financing is very localized. And I need an LLM that understands very specific, very local context. Right? That in Gujarat, in this district, at this time, something like this is happening, and hence I need to either stay away from this or here's an opportunity for me. Right? A public LLM is very unlikely to have that kind of specific context, which I have based on, let's say, what I have done in the last 1 month in that market. Right? And I see this playing a larger and larger impact, and this is one of the drivers for us to say that we may need to pick a hybrid approach, where we have a LLM which does a piece of the work, then I throw that whole thing into a model or an agent that is very customized, understands my context, understands how I want to respond to the customer or that situation, and eventually what my regulatory constraints are. Right? So for example, can I actually throw an Aadhaar card to a public LLM to tell me what is the name and the Aadhaar number of the customer? Right? Can I do that in a regulatory environment? Right? I probably can't. And so I want to use potentially a publicly trained LLM, but deployed for my own private purpose. So I think that's sort of at a broad level how I think we should be looking at public and private LLMs.
Thanks, Satish. So because this quantum computing buzzword that has been going around, and we have been talking about data infrastructure, data management. Now, how do you see this quantum or how do you foresee this quantum computing kind of coming and kind of sustaining alongside the data management, data infrastructure, etc., that we have been talking about?
So, hi, thanks for that question. So, quantum computing, right, what it brings to the table is exponential leap in the computational power. And when you have that power, right, you can solve many more complex problems. So it won't be replacing anything, but it would be augmenting, right? And for example, today we are building a lot of AI ML models. It takes, say, X amount of time to ingest huge amount of data and train those models, right? Doing the same activity would take significantly lesser time with quantum computing into play, right? Now, while it will help us build these models much faster, solve many complex problems which we couldn't practically solve till date and put it to a practical use, right? But there is a downside also to this, right? And the downside is that with this speed and with this power, the cryptographic algorithms that are in use today, which is used to secure your information transmission across different applications over the network, right? This quantum computing will be able to crack those algorithms and put all those all those encryptions at risk. So we will have to eventually use the same technology to build the next level of cryptographic algorithms. So coming back to your question, so it's not a replacement of anything as such, right? But it's augmenting with that significant better computational power.
Okay, thank you. So it's augmentation. My last question is to Anuj. So Anuj, we have been discussing about so many technological advancements and innovations. Now, how does a financial institution get into the prioritization of which technology to pick up, and how to then effectively integrate that into the technological ecosystem to align with the business objectives, as well as taking care of all the regulatory aspects and some of these data privacy and so on and so forth?
So before I really start, on behalf of the whole panel, I'd like to make a mandatory disclosure that all the views that all of us are expressing here are personal, and they don't really reflect what our organizations feel or believe. Having said that, I'm not going to drop an atom bomb here. You know, it's always interesting that we get into so much of manthan, and the theme this year is the data continuum. Matlab kahani data ki hai. Whether you started from analog or whether you came to digital, or whether you go to, or you had the intermediate stage of digital and other stages, the center point of data is what is important, right? Earlier, you used to get data as a byproduct of the business, right? Today, we are saying, agar samjho, to data kuch bolta hai. If you are, the sum total of what all of us are saying is, if you are really listening, the data is telling you something, right? Now, whether it's the regulatory angle to it or whether there's no regulatory angle to it, right? The regulator always chases after the thief has already gone ahead, right? We've seen that. The cops always, whether it's the Hindi movie or wherever else in life, the cops and regulation follow a scam or a theft, right? Life will be no different in the future. I don't anticipate anything to change there. It's only the Sharif people who worry about regulation and everything. The people work around the regulation, and that's the reality of life, right? And that's the atom bomb that I wanted to drop. But if you look at a choice of technology, technology is just an enabler. I think the focus, not just of this conference, but of India has been in the last decade. You saw all the stacks being put up, you saw everything being put up, but the focus has been on data. So you talked about data cleansing, data being pure, data being accurate. Now, data by itself is discrete. By itself, it has no meaning, right? By itself, it has no meaning. But the minute you associate data with another piece of data, it starts giving meaning to that data itself. So a single couple to a married couple, things change, right? So an atom, when it combines with another atom, it gives you a completely new meaning. So we must not forget that it is the data that is driving the business today and not the business which is driving the data. So the cart, now the horse and the cart roles have really changed. We used to say that IT is enabling the business, and then we started saying IT is driving the business. And today we are saying IT actually is all about data. So if you've gone back to the right first step in analog where we started collecting data. So my perspective on this is very philosophical, if you like, and that's why I'm a strategist, that we look at data from what it can deliver in terms of business expansion. So when an organization is looking at data, it has got only one objective in mind. How do I expand? How do I grow? And obviously, when I grow, I will not grow at a loss. So it's also looking at meaningful dimensions to data, which is what is profitable for me and what is not profitable for me. What is going to give me lifelong value, and that's why we have lifetime value. We have a lot of these concepts of data which are coming in. But the fact that the same data is shared across economies is where now the Indian continuum is coming. And the world is really lagging behind on this, and that's why perhaps it's reflecting in our GDP. There is, you know, all these talks about GDP growing. It's because we are managing our data better. an organization, and I think one of us said it in as many words, saying that if you manage your data better, the ROI will follow. The ROI will follow because you are doing your GDP will follow if you manage your organization's data. If you manage your data, the business will expand and it will grow. Now comes the piece of regulation. Regulation is the law which is meant to safeguard misuse of the data. However, when regulation tries to police, it fails. And I think that's the difference regulators and compliance people sitting here need to understand, that regulation is meant not to police but to safeguard. So it's like the role of an auditor, right? You are not you're not a bloodhound. You are there to protect. And that role is being overstepped by compliance, and that's why this panel here is always worried about compliance, right? So I think I've answered most of your questions, and I see Manoj getting frantic because there is a lunch waiting and we have 2 more guys in between.
All right, so thank you for this wonderful conversation. In essence, and in summary, what we are trying to say is that it depends, and it's contextual. So long as it makes business sense, go after it. So with that, I thank my esteemed panelists, and I thank wonderful audience.